those lines. Did anybody have any questions about anything from chapter 1? Whether it was study terms, whether it was articles, whether it was whatever. Go ahead, Walter.
The term which is 1808.
Okay, 1808. Does anybody remember what the significance of 1808 was? Because this one was kind of a big deal. Go ahead, Muhammad. Don't know. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead.
20 years, like before that year, the Congress passed that they're gonna they're gonna make it legal to trade slaves.
It's exactly what it was. Yeah. When you go back at this, there was some thought that what they wanted to do was that they wanted to ban slavery 100%. But they couldn't ban slavery because they wouldn't have gotten the votes to pass the Constitution. So they came up with what they thought was a compromise, which was the 1808 Compromise. And the idea was, instead of banning slavery, what we're going to do is we're going to give the southern colonies 20 years to get off of their dependence of slavery, and then what we'll do is we will ban the slave trade in 1808. The thought is that if you ban the slave trade, then you ban slavery. Ultimately, it's going to peter out. But what actually happened? Go ahead, Mario.
What happened was that the guys that were buying slaves just bought more slaves before.
So it actually had the opposite effect. It accelerated slavery, which meant that this actually undid its own kind of compromise. Yeah?
I just wanted to ask a question. 1808, was it the date that they said it, or was it like 20 years from 1808?
It was 20 years from the founding of the Constitution, which was 1709. And so 1808 was like the 20th year, believe it or not. So that's how they came up with that. Did you have something, Ellie?
Well, I was just also going to say that they also, got, the male slaves to, have sex with the female slaves so that they could produce.
They began to breed. Yeah, they bred, and then when they bred the slaves, or just made them have sex, I guess, then indeed that eased the reliance on the slave trade as well. Go ahead, Cosmo.
So they banned the slave trade on 1808 or 20 years earlier?
It was in 1789, the passage of the Constitution, and then 20 years from that, which was 1808, would have been the ban of the slave trade. And they did this because you would have killed the Southern economy if you would have just tried to make them off of slavery in the beginning. So their thought was, let's compromise on this, but the compromise actually accelerated slavery rather than ending it. What else have y'all got? The who question. Anybody remember anything from the outline in reference to who?
Isn't it about the Declaration of Independence?
It is about the Declaration of Independence. Who came up a number of times, and I believe the questions that I had in the outline was who and what. Who wrote the Declaration, who was it written about, and who was it written for? Who wrote the Declaration?
Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration. Who was it written about? The King of England. And how do you know it was written about King George? What word? He was repeated over and over and over again. So you knew it was about King of England, and ultimately a lot of the negative verbs. He erected, he obstructed, he endeavored to prevent, those kinds of things. Who was it written for? The wealthy, not the wealthy. You were looking for alliances. So it wasn't written for the American people. It wasn't written for the wealthy. It was actually written. The Declaration was a justification for independence. They laid out legal reasons why it should be okay in order to revolt. And then when they laid these out, this was done not for American citizens because they were already upset about this. This wasn't done for the king because the king didn't care. This was done for an ally, and indeed France was the one that took the bait and ultimately joined our side. So who wrote it? Who was it written for? Who was it written about? Those are the three questions. Those are the three questions.
Written about King who?
Was written about King who? King George.
Thank you.
King George. Anything? What other questions have y'all got just from the study guide up here? Go ahead, Annie.
Is the New Jersey plan the plan that's talking about Delaware and the gas?
No.
That's actually the New Jersey article that was dealing with that liquefied natural gas plant. So not a bad connection. That is New Jersey. But New Jersey and Virginia plan was from the very, very beginning. And it was dealing with big and small states. Do y'all remember anything about that? Go ahead, Mark.
Established the, for the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Which one's supposed to be the House and which one's supposed to be the Senate?
New Jersey is the House. Senate? Oh.
Okay, New Jersey's the Senate. Virginia is the House. Okay, what was the New Jersey plan based on?
Everyone would
Population, equal representation.
Okay, New Jersey was based on equal representation. And which would this benefit? Larger states or smaller states? Smaller states. If everybody was treated equally, then the smaller states wouldn't get swallowed up by the bigger ones. And this is indeed the United States Senate, because everybody in the Senate gets 2 seats. California, the biggest state, Wyoming, the littlest state. Virginia plan is based on population, or what one other thing did they suggest? Go ahead. Wealth or taxes. The idea behind the Virginia plan was, if I've got the most people, or if I have the most revenue, basically, then I should have the most what? Representation. And indeed, when you go to the House of Representatives, it is based on population. So the bigger you are, the more people that ultimately you end up having. So this would have benefited the larger states. And their compromise was bicameral Congress, with one being based on the New Jersey plan, the Senate, and the other one being based on the Virginia plan, the House. Go ahead.